Tonight, this room may be quiet, but your heart is not. Maybe it is close to midnight now. Maybe it is already 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, or even past 3 and you still cannot sleep. Somewhere, someone is lying still in the dark, staring at the ceiling, while inside them, everything is loud. Somewhere, someone has just jolted awake from a bad dream and cannot close their eyes again. Somewhere, someone only has enough strength left to pick up a phone, open a prayer, and whisper very softly, "Please pray for me. I need someone to pray for me. I can't sleep. My heart is so heavy. God, please help me." And maybe, tonight, that person is you. Someone is listening at 11:58 in Texas. Someone is listening at 1:52 in Toronto. Someone in Washington State, in South Africa, in Australia, in India, in California, in London, in the Philippines, in Kenya. And they are awake too. Each person in a different room. Each person with a different story. Each person carrying a different burden. But they are all the same in one way. When night falls, the things they held down all day begin to speak. During the day, you can still hold yourself together. You can still reply to messages. Still go to work. Still look strong in front of other people. Still say, "I'm okay." But at night, when the house is quiet, when most of the lights are off, when no one can see your face anymore, the worry begins to grow. The loneliness begins to feel more real. The things you avoided all day begin to come near. Some people tonight cannot sleep because of money, not because they are greedy, not because they only want to be richer, but because they are truly exhausted from living in survival mode. Rent, electric bills, medicine, food, school, bills, debt, a job interview tomorrow, a position that still has not answered. One question turning over and over in the mind: what is tomorrow going to look like? Some people tonight cannot sleep because their body is in pain. A pain in the back. A sickness that is making them afraid. A test result they do not know yet. A surgery tomorrow morning. A weariness they cannot put into words. A heart stretched tight by anxiety. A mind that refuses to shut down. A chest that feels pressed down. A deep exhaustion that has lasted day after day after day. Some people tonight cannot sleep because of family. Because a child has not come home. Because a husband or wife is drifting farther away. Because a father or mother is sick. Because a marriage is cracking. Because a home has too much silence in it. Because there are things that should have been said, but still have not been said. Because something has already broken, and you do not know where to begin putting it back together. Some people tonight cannot sleep because they feel ashamed. Ashamed because they fell again into the very thing they promised they would never return to. Ashamed because of an old habit, an old temptation, an old weakness, an addiction, a secret thing no one knows except God. And maybe deep inside, there is one painful sentence: I did it again. Would God still want to hear me? Have I disappointed him too many times? Some people tonight cannot sleep because they are afraid. Not exactly afraid of one thing they can clearly name, but a quiet fear that rises when darkness covers everything. A feeling of unease in their own room. A nightmare that has just passed. a sense that something is wrong, something is near, something is not good, an invisible dread that will not let them fully relax. Some people tonight cannot sleep because they are grieving. Some have just lost someone they love. Some have walked through a funeral and still do not know how tomorrow is supposed to keep going. Some are missing someone who is no longer here. Some are crying in silence because they do not even know how to explain that pain to anyone else. And some people tonight cannot sleep simply because they have been tired for too long. So tired, they do not even know how to pray anymore. So tired, they do not have beautiful words left to offer God anymore. So tired, they can only say one very short sentence: God, please, help me. Or perhaps they cannot say anything at all. If that is you, then first of all, please hear this clearly. You are not the only one still awake tonight, and you are not the only one carrying a burden that feels too heavy for your strength. Many people come to videos like this, not because they want information, not because they are curious, not because they need one more sermon. They come because they need a place to lay down a trembling heart. They come because the night has become too long, because the mind has become too loud, because they no longer know where to begin praying, because they need someone to lead them step by step back toward peace. That is why some people write only, "I can't sleep." Some write only, "My heart is heavy." Some write only, "Please pray for me." Some write only, "I feel lost." Some write only, "I'm alone right now." Some write only, "I don't know how to pray." Behind those short sentences is an entire life reaching its limit. Because the truth is, nighttime pain is not only about the problem itself, not only money, not only sickness, not only one argument, not only one temptation, not only a job interview tomorrow, not only one unanswered message, not only sleeplessness. What hurts more is the feeling that you have carried it too long, been strong too long, held yourself together too long. And now, at the very hour when you should be resting, you are still carrying the world on your shoulders. Some people are not only worried about money, they are exhausted from having to hold everything together. Some people are not only sick, they are lonely inside their own body. Some people are not only asking God for protection, they are lacking even the feeling of safety in the very place where they lie down. Some people are not only praying for family, they are hurting because they cannot keep the people they love from falling apart. Some people are not only asking for forgiveness, they are tired of falling, standing up, and then falling again. Some people are not only unable to sleep, they are watching the night magnify every wound they tried to hide during the day. And maybe what is wearing you down most tonight is not only the problem itself. Maybe it is the feeling that you have to solve everything by yourself. Be strong by yourself. Understand by yourself. Hold it all together by yourself. Find the way out by yourself. But tonight, you do not need to begin by fixing everything. And tonight, before we go deeper into this place of rest, I want you to know that the story about to unfold is not the story of someone who was perfect from the beginning. It is the story of James, the brother of Jesus. A man who lived very close to him, heard his voice, saw him with his own eyes, and yet there was a time when his heart had not fully believed. That makes James very close to those who are listening tonight. Because some people know about God, and yet their heart is still troubled. Some people love God, and yet they are still tired. Some people still open their lips to pray, but deep inside there is still fear, still doubt, still a feeling that they are too weak to be used by God. But James did not stay there forever. After he encountered the risen Christ, his life changed. From a man who was once slow to believe, he became a righteous man. From someone who once stood near without fully understanding, he became support for those going through trials. So tonight, the story of James does not come to shame you. It comes to remind you that God can still touch a heart that is weary, slow to believe, and carrying many burdens, and give that heart peace, covering, and a path to rest safely in Him. Tonight, you do not need to have all the answers. You do not need to prove that you are strong. You do not need to pray in perfect sentences, in the right way, with beautiful words. And you do not need to wait until you are good enough before you are allowed to stay here. If your heart is troubled, stay here. If you are tired, stay here. If you feel far from God, stay here. If you are ashamed of what no one knows, stay here. If you still believe, but it is a very tired kind of faith, stay here. If you want to believe, but do not know how, stay here. Because God does not only listen to the strong, He is not only with those who already have it together. He is not only near to those who know how to say perfect things. He also sees the one sitting in the dark, unable to sleep, not knowing how to pray, only able to sigh. He also sees the one who feels ashamed of their weakness. He also sees the one who is afraid. He also sees the one trying not to cry so no one else will wake up. And the very gentle thing many people need to hear tonight is this: your weakness does not make God turn His face away. Your weariness does not make Him leave. Your slowness to believe does not make Him abandon you. Even the smallest whisper, He hears. Tonight, we are going to walk with a man who once lived very close to Jesus. And yet there was a time when he did not fully believe. A man who did not begin with perfection, did not begin with a heart that was already ready for everything. A man who once stood very near the light, and yet still carried distance within. And then God touched his life, transformed him, and used that same man to strengthen others walking through trial. But before we go deeply into that story, before you hear about that man, before tonight opens what God wants to do in your heart, I want to say one thing to you very clearly, very gently, and very firmly. You have come to the right place. Not the right place, because every problem will disappear in one night. Not the right place, because by tomorrow morning every bill will be paid, every pain will vanish, every relationship will heal itself, and every question will already have an answer. But the right place, because here you do not have to pretend you are okay. Here you are allowed to be tired. Here you are allowed to be weak. Here you are allowed to come near to God while you are still confused. Here you can lay your burden down a little at a time. Here you will be reminded that God is still near to the restless, still keeps those who are anxious, still protects those lying down in fear, still gives grace to those who think they are too tired to believe. And if tonight you came here with a heart full of worry, then let me say this for you. You have not come to the wrong place. You are not too late. You have not been shut out of the gentleness of God. You do not have to save yourself before He can hold you. You do not have to be clean enough before you can ask for peace. You do not have to be strong enough before you can rest. You have come to the right place to slow down, the right place to be led back to peace, the right place to be reminded that there is still hope, the right place to be covered by the presence of the one who never sleeps, even while you are exhausted. The right place to remember that you can still trust God, even if your faith right now feels no bigger than a breath. And because you have come to the right place, now, tonight, you do not need to rush anymore. You do not need to solve everything right now. You do not need to force your mind to become quiet immediately. You do not need to force your body to fall asleep right now. You do not need to fight every thought one by one. You do not need to try to be a little stronger one more time. Before you keep listening, before you step into the story of that man, before tonight leads you deeper into surrender, just do one very simple thing. Slow down. If your shoulders are tense, let them soften a little. If your jaw is tight, let it loosen gently. If your chest feels heavy, do not force it yet. Just notice that it is heavy, and let God be there with you. If your eyes are still open, that is all right. If tears want to come, that is all right too. If your heart is still loud, that is all right as well. Tonight does not begin with you doing everything right. Tonight begins with you no longer having to hold yourself together alone. In just a moment, we will breathe more slowly. We will let the body understand that it is allowed to rest. We will let the heart hear what fear has drowned out all day. We will let you slowly step out of pressure and into a quiet place where God is with you. So now, just stay here. Let yourself be held in the peace that is coming very slowly, very gently. You are not alone. You have not been forgotten. And tonight, before sleep, you are being led into a safer place than your heart thinks. Now, we are not going to hurry. We will begin with just one slow breath. Now, slow down a little. Do not try to solve your whole life tonight. Do not try to untangle every worry racing through your head. Do not force your heart to feel peaceful immediately, and do not force sleep to come like a command. Just slow down. Because tonight, before you go deeper into the story of James, I want you to know this. James did not write for people who had easy lives. He did not write for people who had nothing to fear, nothing to carry, nothing to endure. He wrote for people under trial, people who were scattered, people who were tired, people carrying pressure in their hearts and living in the middle of things they could not control. In other words, James wrote for people very much like many who are listening tonight. So before you think you need to be strong enough to enter that story, remember this. James did not begin by pushing weak people away. He moved toward those walking through fire, and if tonight you feel as though you too are in the fire, then you have not come to the wrong place. Maybe your fire is money, bills, an unstable job, a door that has not opened, a future that makes your chest tighten every time you think about it. Maybe your fire is sickness, a hurting body, a mind that will not shut off, a long-lasting exhaustion that has made you forget what peace even feels like. Maybe your fire is family, children, someone you love, and you do not know how to keep them close. The grief of watching someone in your family drift away from God, away from life. away from peace. Maybe your fire is shame, an old habit, an old fall. The feeling, why do I keep coming back here? The fear that God has grown tired of you. But James, in his letter, does not look at fire as the end of the story. He sees it as a place where God is still at work. He spoke of faith like gold in the fire. When gold is first taken, weariness. Breathe out in this weakness. You do not have to wait until you are stronger before God can be near. You do not have to wait until everything is finished before He can keep you. You do not have to wait until you stop being afraid before you can receive peace. You do not have to wait until you stop crying before you can be loved. James later became a very steady man. But tonight, the most precious thing about him is not only that steadiness, it is the fact that he did not begin there. He was once someone who needed God to touch him. So his words to those who are suffering are not the words of someone standing outside the fire. They are the words of someone who has passed through transformation. So when you relax your body right now, you are not only resting, you are learning what James learned, that a person does not live by holding themselves together forever, but by turning the heart toward God in the middle of trial. Now, take one more breath. Breathe in very slowly, making room for the wisdom of God to enter your troubled thoughts. Breathe out very softly, letting go of a little of the pressure to understand everything, fix everything, do everything. Breathe in. He is the Father of every good gift. Breathe out. He can give me what I need tonight. Breathe in. I come near to you. Breathe out, and you come near to me. And if there is still a very private fear in your heart, something you have not dared to say out loud, a story no one knows, a pain no one fully sees, then remember this gentle line in the words of James. He speaks of God as one who is full of compassion and mercy, not cold, not distant, not standing there watching you collapse and waiting for you to get up on your own, but full of mercy, full of compassion. So before we go any further into his story, let this rest in your heart for a moment. The God James came to know is not one who delights in watching his children sink. He is the God who is full of mercy and compassion. Breathe in. He is full of mercy. Breathe out. He is full of compassion. Breathe in. He sees my weariness. Breathe out. He does not leave me. Now, when your body has softened a little, when your breathing has become gentler than it was at the beginning, when your mind is not completely quiet yet, but no longer fighting as fiercely as before, then we can begin to step more deeply into James. We will not come to him as though we are approaching a dry lesson. We will come to him as to a man who was once slow to believe, once needed to be changed, and then became a lamp for those walking through the night of trial. So now, just one more breath. Breathe in slowly and let this night become gentler. Breathe out softly and let your heart become ready to enter the story of James. Not to escape the things that are making you tired, not to pretend that everything is all right, but so you can hear more clearly an ancient voice, a real voice, a steady voice, stepping into your night. That is the voice of James. And the first thing you need to know is this. James did not write to people who were living peaceful, easy lives. He did not write to people whose lives were light, easy to breathe in, free from collision and pressure. He wrote to people scattered among the nations, people who had been driven away from what was familiar, people pressed by circumstances, the poor, those persecuted for their faith, those carrying more pain than they could fully put into words. In other words, James wrote to people very much like many who are listening tonight. Maybe you have not been exiled the way they were, but your heart is still scattered in many directions. Part of it is running after unpaid bills. Part of it is caught in the pain in your body. Part of it is bound up with the son, the husband, the wife, the father, the mother you are worried about. Part of it is trapped in tomorrow's fear. Part of it is still lying inside yesterday's shame. And perhaps that is why you cannot sleep tonight. James knew that state of the soul. He knew what it meant to write to people living in real trial. Not trial in theory, but trial that touched their money, their bodies, their future, their family, their safety, and even their faith. And then James begins with a sentence that almost seems opposite to the human heart. He says, "Consider it joy whenever you face trials of many kinds." If you only hear that quickly, it may make you pull back. Because when people are hurting, their natural response is not joy. When they lose a job, when sickness comes, when a family begins to break, when they are still awake in the middle of the night with worry, the heart does not naturally rejoice. But James is not telling people to pretend everything is fine. He is not teaching a fake kind of joy. He is not saying, smile as though pain is not real. What he says is deeper than that. He is reminding hurting people of this. Trial does not get the final word. The fire does not have the right to fully define who you are, and pain is not always a sign that God has abandoned you. James says that the testing of faith produces endurance. That means that a quiet work is taking place inside, even while the outside of your life is still full of confusion. It is as though he is sitting in the night and saying to a weary soul, "I know you are in the fire, but fire does not always come to destroy you. Sometimes God uses that very fire to make your faith deeper, truer, steadier." James gives a very powerful picture. Faith is like gold. When gold is first taken out of the ground, it is not pure. It is mixed with many other things. If it is to become pure, it must pass through fire. The heat causes what does not belong to rise to the surface. Not so the gold will be destroyed, but so what is true may remain. And perhaps tonight, you are hearing this inside your own fire. Maybe that fire is financial worry, debt, work that has not come, the burden of carrying more than your strength can bear. Maybe that fire is pain in your body, a sickness with no clear answer yet, a weariness so long and deep that you cannot remember the last time you truly felt at peace. Maybe that fire is family, a loved one who has not returned to God. Brokenness, silence, relationships you do not know how to save. Maybe that fire is a hidden war in your own heart. Something hard to speak about, an old habit, an addiction, a shame, another fall. But James does not look at that fire as if everything is lost. He looks at it as a place where, if you still hold on to God, God can still do something deeper than you think. Now, notice your breathing. Do not try to breathe too deeply, just a little more slowly. Breathe in slowly and think very gently. Trial does not mean God has abandoned me. Breathe out softly. God can still work in the fire. Breathe in. He still sees me in this night. Breathe out. He does not leave me in the middle of trial. James also says that endurance must finish its work so that a person may become mature, complete, lacking nothing in what matters most. That does not mean God enjoys seeing his children suffer. It means God does not waste a single tear. He does not ignore a single sleepless night. He does not allow trial to happen as though it means nothing. Even in the place where you feel you are only surviving from day to day, God can still be doing a deep work within. And if tonight you do not know what to do with everything you are carrying, James goes on to say something very beautiful, something that sounds as though it was written for minds racing too fast, hearts too overloaded, people who do not know what the next step is. If anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask God. James does not say, figure it all out by yourself. He does not say, stay awake until morning until you find the answer. He does not say, control everything by your own strength. He says, ask God. Because there are nights when you do not need the whole map of your life. You only need enough light for the next step. There are nights when you do not need God to explain every reason for your pain. You only need to know that He is near enough to lead you through it. There are nights when peace does not come from understanding everything, but from knowing who is holding you. So if your mind is still spinning, do not condemn yourself too quickly. Just bring those things into a very short prayer. Lord, give me wisdom. Lead me through this night. Keep my heart. Keep this house. Keep my family. Keep my body. Keep my mind. Now, take another breath. Breathe in. I do not need to understand everything tonight. Breathe out. I can ask God for wisdom. Breathe in. He does not rebuke me for being confused. Breathe out. He is still willing to lead me. James says that God gives generously and without reproach. That is a very gentle sentence for tonight, because many people pray in fear, afraid they are asking too much, afraid they have been weak for too long, afraid God is tired of listening, afraid He will say, "Why are you still not better? Why are you still afraid? Why have you still not learned this lesson?" But James says, ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach. That means tonight, when you come to God in your weariness, your confusion, your trembling, your weakness, He does not look at you with contempt. He does not shame you because you do not have all the answers. He does not turn away because you are still a struggling heart. He is Father, and James knew that. So now, instead of forcing yourself to grasp everything, let this breath become the way you open your hands before God. Breathe in. God does not rebuke me when I come and ask. Breathe out. He is generous to those who need Him. Breathe in. I can come near to Him just as I am right now. Breathe out, and He still receives me. But James also reminds us of something very real. Do not be double-minded. Do not stand between God and fear, as though you do not know what you will lean on. That does not mean that if you are trembling, you are disqualified. It means this: in the middle of all the noise, you need to know where your heart will rest. Tonight, you may not have enough strength to solve every problem, but you can still choose where you lean. You can still say, I will not lean on panic. I will, Him. They know about God, but they are still confused. They hear His word, but fear still speaks louder. They call on His name, but when night falls, their hearts still become restless. They are not enemies of faith, but they have not yet truly come to rest inside that faith. James had once been in a place like that. And that means his story is not the story of a man who never wrestled. He does not step into his letter as someone who understood everything from the beginning. He does not appear as a perfect soul who never had dark places, never had distance. He was a man who had once stood very near to Jesus, and yet his heart still needed to be opened. Perhaps this is one of the most important truths a nighttime listener needs to hear. Because many people think, if I were really close to God, I would not be this confused. If I truly believed, I would not be this afraid. If I really belonged to Him, I would not be lying awake like this in the night. If I were truly mature, I would not still be doubting, still be tired, still be weak like this. But James stands there as a quiet and steady answer. Being near to God does not mean you already understand Him fully. And the fact that you are still learning how to believe does not mean God has pushed you out of His story. Think about that in this stillness. James grew up with Jesus in a life that others would think no one could possibly be closer to. He was very near to holy things, very near to truth, very near to the Son of God. And yet, he still had to walk a road from being near to truly seeing. And perhaps many people listening tonight are on that very road. Some grew up in Christian homes. Some were familiar with prayer from childhood. Some know more Bible verses than they care to admit. Some have gone to church, worshipped, even wept under preaching. But then life, pain, money, sickness, brokenness, failure, old habits, and long seasons of exhaustion made their heart heavier than their faith. On the outside, they are still close to holy things. But on the inside, there is still distance. James understood that distance. He understood what it felt like to stand near a great reality while your heart had not yet fully stepped into it. He understood what it meant to live in the shadow of what is holy and still not fully surrender your heart to it. He understood what it was like not to yet see fully what was standing right in front of him. And right here, James becomes a very strong case study for your script. Not simply because he is the author of the book of James, not simply because he later became a righteous man, but because he is living proof that a person can be near to God while the heart is still slow, and God still has not let go of that person. That is very important for the listener before sleep, because nighttime is when people often judge themselves most harshly. When the noise outside becomes quiet, the accusing voice inside gets louder. I should be better than this. I should be stronger. I've heard so much about God. Why am I still like this? I should not still be this afraid. I should not have fallen again. I should not still be so uncertain. But James does not give us a story to crush the weak. He gives us a story that says, slow faith is not the end. Slow understanding is not the final sentence. Outward nearness with inward distance is not where the story has to stop. Maybe tonight, what is making you tired is not only your circumstances. Maybe it is also the feeling that you are not where you should be with God. You still turn on this video. You still reach for prayer. You still want to hear the word of God before sleep. But inside, you know something has not truly come to rest yet. Maybe you are still holding back some part of your life. Maybe you still carry hesitation. Maybe you are still resisting in your heart. Maybe you do not know how to believe in the middle of so many concrete pains of real life. Maybe you have not left God, but you have not truly let yourself fall into His hands either. James had once known that space too, and that is what makes him so worth listening to. Because later, when James speaks about faith, trial, endurance, wisdom, drawing near to God, he does not speak as a man who never had distance. He speaks as a man who walked through a real journey, a man who had once been near and still did not understand, a man whose heart once had to be shaken open, a man who did not only know Jesus by family position, but then had to come to know Him through inward transformation. Perhaps this is where the listener tonight needs to linger a little longer, not to condemn themselves, but to be honest. You can be near the things of God and yet not fully give your heart to Him. You can know God in language and yet not truly rest in His presence. You can call His name and still keep fears in your heart that are larger than your surrender. You can hear the word and yet not let that word sink into the deepest place of your soul. James will help the listener understand that this does not make them hopeless. It only means their story is still being written. Now, let that sentence settle very gently. Your story is still being written. James was not forever trapped in that place of slow faith. He did not remain forever in that nearness without recognition. He was not abandoned in that in-between place. And that is why this third part is not a chapter of failure. It is a chapter of honesty. James was not complete. James had not yet seen everything. James had not yet fully believed. And because of that, he becomes a place where the weak in faith can breathe a little without feeling cast aside. Now, let the pace of the story become slower still. No need for a long prayer. No need to strain yourself trying to feel something. Just stay here with this truth. James was the brother of Jesus. James grew up very near to Jesus. There was a time when James did not fully believe. Even the family did not fully understand Jesus. Nearness does not automatically produce mature faith, and God still continued writing James's story. If you want, you can simply breathe slowly and let one short sentence rest in your heart. Slow faith does not mean God has thrown me away. Once again, slow faith does not mean God has thrown me away. That does not encourage indifference. It does not give people permission to remain forever hard-hearted. But it does open hope for those who are truly weary, truly confused, truly still on the road, and not yet there. That is why James fits the nighttime listener so well. Because nighttime is not when people need to hear a voice that only makes them more ashamed. Nighttime is when they need a living witness to say, I understand that distance. I understand what it feels like not to fully see yet. I understand what it means to live near what is holy, while your heart has not yet fully surrendered. And I am also proof that God can do more than you think. But part 3 is not yet the time to tell everything God did with James. Part 3 is only the moment when we stand still long enough to see clearly his true starting point. Not a beautiful starting point, not a perfect starting point, but a deeply human starting point. That is why the transformation of James later becomes so powerful, because he did not begin from the place of already seeing everything. He began from the place of needing his eyes to be opened. And perhaps what you need most tonight is not to pretend that you have already seen everything, understood everything, become steady in everything. Perhaps what you need is to be honest, the way James had to be honest, in his own journey. That. I still have many questions. I still have places where I do not fully believe. I am still afraid. I am still tired. There is still distance in me, but the story does not end here. That is where part 3 must stop. Not in disappointment, not in condemnation, but at a threshold. James had lived near Jesus. James had once not fully believed. James had once stood very close and still not truly seen. But he would not remain there forever. An encounter was coming. A turning point was coming. A moment that would change everything. In the next part, we will step into that turning point itself. James meets the risen one, and from there, the man who had once been slow to believe begins to become a righteous man, a pillar, someone able to strengthen those under trial. But for now, stay for a little while inside this truth. You are not the only one who has been near to God while the heart still felt far away. You are not the only one who knows about God and is still tired. You are not the only one who hears about him and is still afraid. And if James was not thrown away in his slow faith, then tonight you have not been thrown away either. Let that sentence rest in your heart, gently, like a small anchor before the night goes deeper. God is still writing the story of those who are slow to believe. James did not begin as a man who had already seen everything. He did not begin as a man who had completely surrendered from the start. He lived very near to Jesus, nearer than almost anyone else, because he was his brother. He heard that voice in ordinary days. He saw that life from very close range. He witnessed many things outsiders never saw, and yet, for a time, that nearness still had not become full faith. That is what makes the story of James feel real. Not decorated, not mythologized, not the kind of story where someone begins as a symbol of steadfastness from the beginning. James began as a man near to God, but with distance still inside his heart. And that is exactly why James is so close to the listener tonight. Because some people still pray, and yet their heart is still afraid. Some still know about God, and yet have not truly come to rest in him. Some still hear scripture, but when night falls, their worries grow larger. Some have not turned away from God, but they have not yet dared to fully place their life into his hands. James knew that place. James had been in that place. But the story of James does not end in that halfway state. There came a moment when everything could no longer remain the same. James saw the risen one. No longer only the brother remembered from family life. No longer only a familiar face from the old house. No longer only someone he had once lived beside. No longer only a teacher others talked about. James saw the risen King, and right there, the whole story turns. Because there are things you may hear about for a very long time and still remain unchanged. But when living truth stands before you, you cannot remain the same. For James, the resurrection was not an idea, not a theological topic, not a belief to discuss. It was an encounter with living truth. The one he had once looked at with overly familiar eyes now stood before him in resurrection glory. The one he had once not fully recognized could no longer be placed inside an old misunderstanding. The one he had once known by blood relation was now known as Lord, as King, as the one who conquered death. That was not a small change. not a passing emotional moment, not merely thinking a little differently. Everything changed. When James saw the risen one, the way he looked at Jesus changed. The way he looked at himself changed as well. The way he looked at suffering, trial, faith, obedience, and even the purpose of his life changed. From that moment on, Jesus was no longer just a family memory. He was truly Lord. He was the living one. He was the one who defeated death. He was the one who could not be held by the tomb and could not be trapped inside old human misunderstandings. For James, the resurrection completely shattered the old wall of slow faith. And that matters greatly for the listener tonight. Because often what people need is not simply another explanation. They need an encounter with the living reality of Christ. Not only to hear about him, not only to remember him, not only to keep an image of him inside familiar religious habits, but to truly let him step into the deepest place of the heart as the one who is alive. Only then does fear stop sitting on the throne. Only then does faith stop being a label. Only then does peace stop being a beautiful phrase and become a real shelter. What does that mean? It means James was no longer standing at the edge of truth. He was no longer in that half near, half far place, half believing and half holding back. He was no longer only the brother of Jesus by blood. Now he belonged to Jesus by living faith. And when true faith enters, it does not merely change thoughts. It changes the person. James began to become steady, not because he had never been weak, but because he had been touched in the place where he had been weakest. James began to stand, not because he had never doubted, but because he had seen one so real that he could no longer return to the old way. James began to become someone who could hold others up, not because he had never been in between, but because he himself had been drawn out of that in-between place. That is why James is so worth holding on to for the nighttime listener. He is not a man who never fought. He is a man who was changed. And someone who has truly been changed always speaks differently from someone who only speaks from theory. This is where the story of James reaches directly into the listener tonight. If a man who once lived very near to Jesus and still did not fully believe, could still be touched by the risen one, could still be changed from the root, then tonight you are not without hope either. If you are tired, there is still hope. If your faith is weak, there is still hope. If you are afraid, there is still hope. If you are worried about money, sickness, family, the future, and your mind will not stop racing, there is still hope. If you have fallen again and again and feel ashamed of yourself, there is still hope. Because what saved James was not that he made himself stronger. What changed James was not a private effort to quietly fix himself. What changed James was that he met the living one. And this is the point I want to make very clear. Only God is true protection. Only God is true peace. Only God is the place where a person becomes safe enough to sleep. Not because life suddenly stops shaking, but because Christ is alive. And the living one does not abandon his children in the night. The living one does not let go of the weary. The living one is not only remembered, he is present. If James had been left with only memories of Jesus, he would never have changed so deeply. But James met the living Christ, and because Christ lives, the listener today can lie down and say, I do not understand everything, but I am not alone. I cannot see what tomorrow will look like, but my Lord is not in the grave. I am tired, but the one who keeps me is alive. James was not changed merely to have a beautiful, private, spiritual experience. He was changed so he could stand firm, so he could become a righteous man, so he could later become a pillar in the early church, so that when believers were scattered, poor, persecuted, and tried, there would be a strong voice speaking to them from a place that had truly been touched by fire and grace. That is very beautiful. Because God did not only rescue James from slow faith, He also turned James into someone others could lean on. That is how God works. He does not only bind up a life, He can also use that life to help carry others. He does not only pull one person out of darkness, He can also make that person a lamp for those still walking through the night. He does not only give one person peace, He can also use that person's story to help others find peace. And so James is not merely a character in a book. He is living proof that when the risen one touches a life, that life no longer belongs to halfwayness. This is where this part must close with steadiness, not just emotion. Because Christ lives, James was changed. Because Christ lives, a slow believer can become a steady man. Because Christ lives, the listener today can also find a place of true peace. Not in control, not in figuring out every answer, not in worries racing through the night, but in God. Only in God is a person truly protected. Only in God does the heart find a place to land. Only in God does the night stop being a pit that swallows the mind and become a place where the soul is covered. So tonight, if you still cannot solve everything, that is all right. If you still cannot understand everything, that is all right. If there is only one thing you can do, then do this. Place your sleep into the hands of the living God. Not God as a distant memory, not God only inside an old lesson, but God who is alive, near, seeing, holding, and ruling over both this night and tomorrow morning. And here is where the Psalms begin to become a shelter for the listener. Because when James met the risen one, his story did not stand outside the flow of Scripture. It opened into exactly what the restless heart at night has always needed. A living God who watches, guards, and leads the soul back to peace. For a long time now, the Psalms have whispered to those who cannot sleep, there is a keeper who does not fall asleep. There is one still watching when human eyes have grown tired. There is one who leads the soul beside still waters. There is one who allows people to lie down in peace. And tonight, after seeing James touched by the risen Christ, the listener is no longer hearing only an old story. They begin to hear the Psalms opening inside their own room. The Lord is still our refuge. The Lord is still the keeper. The Lord is still the one who leads a trembling heart into quietness. The Lord is still the one who does not leave people alone when they lie down. That matters deeply for a nighttime prayer. Because at this point, James has brought the listener to living proof, and the Psalms give them a shelter to remain under. So tonight, after hearing the story of James, the listener may not need to say much, only to whisper quietly in the heart, Lord, if you could touch James, please touch me too. If you could pull him out of slow faith, please pull me out of this panic too. If you could make him stand firm, please keep me through this night too. If you are the keeper of those who are awake late, then keep this room also. Keep this heart. Keep this sleep. Keep this family. Keep this mind. No need for many more words than that. Because sometimes the truest prayer of the night is not the longest prayer. It is the most honest one. And perhaps tonight, the truest prayer of the listener is simply this: Lord, please be here with me. Please do not leave me tonight. Please let me sleep under your covering. This is where three streams meet: the story of James, the whisper of the Psalms, and the real night of the listener. James was once slow to believe, then met the risen one. The Psalms have long sung of the shepherd who keeps, covers, and leads into rest. And the listener tonight is lying in a real night, filled with worry, weariness, unanswered things not yet resolved. But in the middle of all of that, one truth remains unchanged. Christ is alive. And because Christ is alive, the slow believer is not at the end of the road, the weary are not cast aside, the one awake late at night is not alone, the anxious still have a refuge, the hurting are still seen, the one trying to sleep is not, struggling alone in the dark. That is why this part can close with more peace than it had at the beginning. Not because every problem has disappeared, but because the listener has been placed on a different foundation, a foundation held by the risen one, a foundation sung by the Psalms, a foundation witnessed to by James, and a foundation strong enough that tonight the listener can begin to hand over the heart, very slowly, very gently, a little more peacefully. Now, if you want, simply breathe slowly one more time, and let this sentence rest quietly in your heart. Because Christ lives, I can rest. After meeting the risen one, James did not simply have a deep emotional moment and then move on. That transformation did not stop at feeling. It went into the backbone of his life. It changed the way he lived, the way he stood, the way he saw God, the way he saw people, and the way he carried responsibility before the Lord. James was no longer the man standing nearby in hesitation. He was no longer the man who knew Jesus only by blood relation. From this point on, James began to become a man steady in faith, a man shaped by the truth he had seen. Jesus Christ had risen, and because he had truly been changed, he began to be able to stand for others. That is something very beautiful in the story of James. Some people are touched and then keep that experience only for themselves. But some people are renewed by God, and that renewal becomes strength for carrying those who are weaker than they are. James belonged to the second kind. He was changed not only so that he himself could have peace, he was changed so that he could become someone able to stand firm in chaotic days, and from that firm place become support for those being battered by the storm. That is why James is no longer merely a figure from the past. He begins to become a voice the nighttime listener can trust. That does not only mean he held a high office, it means others could lean on him. When the church was still young, still under pressure, still easily shaken, James was one of the men standing there, steady, not easily moved, not speaking empty words. He did not become a pillar because he carried the title Brother of Jesus. He was not lifted up simply because of a flesh and blood relationship. He became a pillar because he had truly been transformed. The resurrection of Jesus did not only touch James's emotions, it recreated the posture of his life. From a man who once had not fully believed, he became a man others could depend on. From a man who once stood in distance, he became a man standing nearest to spiritual responsibility. From a man who once needed his own eyes opened, He became a man able to lead others through the night. That matters greatly for the listener today. Because people do not merely need a beautiful voice. They need a voice that has been through the fire. They do not need someone who only knows how to say the right things. They need someone who speaks from the place where God has truly touched them. James was that kind of man. He was not someone speaking from theory, but from a truth that had broken down his old life and built a new one. James understood that following God is not a religious hobby, not something you add on to life, not a beautiful label to wear. For James, following God was a matter of life and death. He knew that because he had gone from not truly believing to recognizing Jesus as the living one. Once you have seen the risen Christ, you cannot treat faith as a hobby anymore. You cannot treat the Lord as decoration in your life anymore. You cannot keep him as merely a sacred memory for convenient moments anymore. James understood that real faith must live under real pressure. Real faith does not only sound good in worship gatherings. It must be able to stand in poverty. It must breathe in pain. It must shine in scattering. It must endure days when quick answers do not come. That is why the voice of James feels different. He does not speak like someone trying to make faith sound attractive. He speaks like someone who knows that if faith cannot live in real life, it will break very quickly under pressure. The listener tonight needs a voice like that as well. Not a voice so soft that it cannot support anyone, and not a voice so hard that it makes the weary even more tired. But a voice that is steady and real, one that knows human beings are carrying heavy things, and therefore need a real faith, not a fake one, not mere words. James did not write this letter to people sitting in comfort, ease, abundance, and calm. He wrote to Jewish believers scattered everywhere, people no longer in familiar places, people driven out of old stability, people living like those who had been uprooted. Poor people, oppressed people, people persecuted for their faith. They did not read James the way people read a motivational article. They read it as people who needed something real enough to hold on to. Think about that. A mother worried she cannot provide enough for her children. A man forced out of the place he once knew. A person living with the feeling of having no solid ground under their feet. A believer oppressed simply because they belong to God. A suffering person who still has to keep going. A poor person who is still told to stand firm in faith. Those were the people on the other end of James's letter, and that is exactly why the letter of James carries weight. It was not born in a classroom. It came out of the fire. It came out of pressure. It came out of lives being tested from many directions. That is why when listeners today open their hearts to James, they are not hearing a voice far removed from them. They are hearing someone speak to people who are truly living under pressure. Part 5. The listener today is also being scattered within. Maybe you are not a refugee in the historical sense, like the first people who received this letter. But tonight, many people are also living in a state of being scattered. The mind is scattered by money, by bills, by uncertain work, by a future that cannot yet be seen. The body is scattered by sickness, by pain, by long exhaustion. The heart is scattered by family, by children, by loved ones, by things that have not been healed. The soul is scattered by shame, by old habits, by guilt, by falls you do not know how to rise from. Sleep is scattered by thoughts that keep running without stopping. Some people lie in one place, yet inside feel as though they are being pulled in 10 directions. One part is in the past. One part is in tomorrow. One part is in fear. One part is in pain. One part is with someone they love. One part is in the question itself. Is God still holding me? That is why the letter of James steps into tonight so naturally. Because even if the circumstances are not exactly the same, the condition of the soul is strikingly similar. Human beings are being pressed, tested, stretched, scattered, and they need to be called back to a center stronger than their fear. James knows that condition, and because he knows it, he does not begin with empty phrases. He goes straight into trial. And then James says what your original script emphasized very clearly. Consider the many trials you face as something to rejoice in. That sentence can only be heard rightly when we understand who James is speaking to. He is not speaking to people living light, easy lives. He is speaking to the poor, the scattered, the pressured, the persecuted, the truly hurting. So James cannot possibly be teaching a fake kind of joy. He cannot be telling them to smile as though nothing hurts. He cannot be telling them to put on a face of "I'm fine" and call that faith. What James is saying goes much deeper. He wants them to see that trial is not automatic proof of abandonment, that fire does not necessarily mean God has pulled his hand away, that in the middle of trial, a work is taking place inside that ordinary eyes cannot yet fully see. The testing of faith produces endurance. That is the voice of James. Not romanticizing pain, not idolizing hardship, not coating suffering with sugar, but also not allowing trial to become the final king. He sees in trial a place where faith is refined, not theoretical faith, but faith that can still live when a person no longer controls everything. Faith that can still stand when the old ground beneath their feet is gone. Faith that can still breathe in the dark of night. This is where the nighttime listener deeply needs James. Because the night is when pain likes to say, everything is falling apart. James does not deny the pain, but he answers, no, if you are still in the hands of God, then even in this very trial, God may still be doing something deeper. This is one of the most beautiful handrails James places into the listener's hands. If anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask God. Not figure everything out by yourself. Not force your mind to stop racing. Not solve everything before you sleep. Not become strong immediately. But this, ask God. James knows that trial confuses the heart. It causes people to ask hundreds of questions. Why? When? How can I bear this? How do I keep going? And James does not hand them a full map of their whole life. He simply brings them back to the right place, to God. Because there are nights when you do not need to know the whole road. You only need enough light for one step. You do not need God to explain everything at once. You only need to know that He is here and that He can lead you through this night. That is why this part 5 must stop at that handrail. If you lack wisdom, ask God. Do not save yourself. Do not cling to panic. Do not turn your worry into your teacher. Turn back to God. Because only in God can a scattered heart be gathered again. Only in God can the weary find shelter. Only in God can the soul become calm enough to slowly let itself fall into sleep. And here, the Psalms enter very naturally like a covering. Because the scattered people in James's day also needed a place of refuge. They also needed a song in the night. They also needed a word true enough to hold them when everything around them no longer felt secure. For a long time, the Psalms have been the voice of weary souls like these. That voice reminds us that there is one who is a refuge. There is one who watches over Israel and never sleeps. There is one who shepherds through the valley of the shadow of death. There is one who makes people lie down in green pastures beside still waters. There is one who allows people to lie down and sleep in peace, not because life has become safe, but because God is still keeping them. That is where James and the Psalms meet. James speaks of trial. The Psalms give people a place to hide in the middle of that trial. James speaks of endurance. The Psalms give people a melody so they do not break apart in the night. James points upward to God as the source of wisdom. The Psalms sing of God as refuge, as keeper, as shade at the right hand. And the listener today needs both, a steady voice like James and a gentle shelter like the Psalms. So if tonight the listener does not know what longer prayer to say, they can pray very simply. Lord, when I am scattered within, gather me again in you. When I do not understand this trial, give me wisdom. When I am too tired, do not let me slip out of your hands. When I am worried about tomorrow, keep me in the peace of tonight. When I no longer have strength to think, let you think for what I cannot understand. When my soul is too loud, let it lie down in you. That alone is enough. Because sometimes the truest prayer is not the longest one. It is the one that brings the scattered soul back to one place, and that place is not control, not a perfect plan, not an instant answer, but God himself. James was changed so that he could speak to people under trial. The first readers of his letter needed that. The listener tonight needs that too. They do not need one more layer of pressure. They do not need to be told to fix themselves quickly. They need to be placed on a foundation strong enough that their heart stops being pulled in every direction. And this part 5 wants to place them on exactly that foundation. God is the one to whom James points people. God is the source of wisdom. God is the source of every good gift. God is the refuge of the scattered. God is the one who keeps those who no longer have strength to keep themselves, and only in God can the weary truly feel safe enough to sleep. Not because every trial has ended, not because every question has been answered, not because tomorrow has become easy, but because God is still near. God is still protecting. God is still the unchanging place, and the listener can slowly let themselves fall into that truth. So tonight, if you do not yet know what truth to hold in your heart before sleep, then just hold this. When I am scattered, God can still gather me. When I lack wisdom, God can still lead me. When I am tired, God is still the place where my soul can rest. Now, when James has already risen as a pillar, when he is no longer the half-committed man of earlier days, he begins to speak. And the first thing he says is not an easy promise. He does not begin by softening the lives of those who are hurting. He does not pretend they are not truly weary. He does not tell scattered, poor, oppressed people that everything is all right. James goes straight into trial. He looks at people living under real pressure, then tells them this: when many kinds of trials come upon you, do not assume God has left you. Do not rush to think that fire means hope is gone. Do not measure the love of God by how comfortable your circumstances feel. That is where James is so different. because people often see trial as the end. But James sees trial as a place where something is happening within. He is not telling them to love suffering. He is not promoting a false joy. He is speaking of a deeper understanding that God can still be at work even in the very place that seems to be crushing you. He says the testing of faith produces endurance. What does that mean? It means that when a person keeps holding on to God in confusion, in sleeplessness, in anxiety, in hardship, in sickness, with a chest heavy from fear, something is being formed in them. James is inviting the reader to move from hesitation into full leaning. That does not mean you are no longer trembling. It does not mean you understand everything. It does not mean you have become strong. It means you know where your heart is going to live. Tonight, if the listener cannot do anything great, they can still do this. Do not let fear become your home. Let God become your home. That is where James is leading the reader. James also knows that after trial often comes temptation. When a person has been tired too long, they look for shortcuts. When a person has been hurting too long, they look for numbness. When a person has been in lack, they easily reach in the wrong direction. When a person has been sad, they easily return to things that promise a little escape. James says very clearly, do not say that God is tempting you. God does not lure people into evil. He is not the author of collapse. He does not push you into darkness and then watch you fall. James does something deeply necessary here. He separates God from destruction. This matters greatly for the listener tonight, because some people are misunderstanding their pain. They think God is toying with them. They think He pushed them into weakness only to blame them for being weak. They think He is standing behind the darkness. James answers, no. God is not the source of temptation. God is not the source of ruin. God is not the hand dragging the soul into filth and shadow and leaving it trapped there. So who is God in the listener's night? James says, every good and perfect gift comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no change. This is one of the bedrock sentences of the whole script. Every good thing comes from God. Wisdom comes from God. Protection comes from God. Light in the middle of a confused mind comes from God. The softening of a soul torn within comes from God. A sleep preserved through the night also comes from God. Life, mercy, a chance to begin again, strength to rise, courage to confess, tears wiped away, all of these come from the Father. So James wants the listener to relearn this. Do not assign to God what He does not do. And do not forget to trace every good thing back to its true source. He knows people can hear many things about God and still remain unchanged. They can hear sermons, they can read Bible verses, they can open a prayer video every night, they can say Amen and still go on living the same way. James says, do not merely hear the word, fall, without feeling as though they are dropping into emptiness. So if tonight the listener needs to keep one sentence in their heart before part 7 opens, let it be this: every good thing comes from the Father. If I lack wisdom, I can ask God, and only in God can my soul truly rest. James has come a very long way from the man who once believed slowly. Now, near the end of his letter, he no longer speaks only as a man who has been changed. He speaks like a spiritual father, a man standing among weary people, knowing that if they are not kept by God, they will break easily in the long night. So James begins to speak to them about something not easy to hear, but deeply necessary for souls that have been tired too long. Be patient, not the patience of a cold person, not gritted teeth, endurance, as though God were nowhere to be found, but a patience with God in it, a waiting that is not hopeless, a standing still, not because there is no way forward, but because you know you are in the hands of the one who is still working. James writes, almost as though saying, "Be patient until the coming of the Lord." That sentence fits those who are awake late at night so well, because the night is when people want everything to change immediately. They want the pain gone now. They want the anxiety quiet now. They want the door to open now. They want their child to return now. They want the body healed now. They want the debt to vanish now. They want sleep to come now. But James knows some things do not arrive according to human urgency. Some things require waiting. Not because God is late, but because he is doing something deeper than our panic. If tonight the listener is in a season of waiting, James does not say, "You are not allowed to be tired." He says, "Learn how to wait under the hand of God. Lord, teach me to wait without despair. Teach me that delay does not mean abandonment." Then James continues with a picture that is gentle, real, and so fitting for tonight. The farmer waiting for the harvest. The farmer sows seed into the ground. Then he waits for the early rain and the late rain. He does not dig the seed up every night to see if it has started growing. He does not stand in the field shouting at the soil to make it grow faster. He does not force the season to arrive before its time. He sows. He waits. He expects. He does his part. Then he leaves the rest in the hands of God. That is such a beautiful image for the nighttime listener. Maybe tonight you are like that farmer. You have prayed, you have tried, you have sown what you could sow, you have cried, you have waited, you have done your part, and now you are lying here, not knowing when the season will change. James is saying to you, do not dig up the seed through panic. Do not force the answer to come through fear. Do not take back from God what you asked him to hold. Tonight, perhaps the most spiritual thing you can do is not to keep doing more, but to hand it over. As the psalm says, "I wait for the Lord, my soul waits." Lord, keep my heart from becoming frantic in this season of waiting. Teach me the rhythm of the farmer, not giving up, not panicking, not despairing. Then James goes one step further into reality. He knows that when people have been tired too long, they do not only hurt, they also start to harden. They become quicker to snap, quicker to complain, quicker to wound, quicker to throw their pressure onto the person closest to them. So James says, do not grumble against one another. He understands very clearly the psychology of a person under trial. When the heart is stretched too tightly, it spills pressure onto others. When answers do not come, people begin to bite one another. When the night becomes too long, bitterness starts soaking into the voice. This is very real. Some people tonight are not only hurting because of circumstances, they are also hurting because of what those circumstances are doing to their own heart, making them more irritated, harsher, more exhausted, less gentle, less patient. And sometimes they do not even like the person they are becoming. James stops that, not to make the reader feel more guilty, but to save them from a new wound. It is as though he is saying, do not let the long night produce more bitterness. Do not let trial not only hurt you, but harden you. Do not let waiting turn you into a soul that is always sharp, always complaining, always ready to blame. Lord, guard my mouth in this weary night. Do not let pain make my heart bitter. Let me soften again in your presence. Then James brings forward a very important name, Job. That is not accidental. James knows there are people who can only be comforted by seeing that someone else has also walked through a very long night. Job was a man who lost many things. He lost peace. He lost possessions. He lost children. He lost health. He lost any feeling that he understood what was happening. And there were moments when all he had left was a cry of pain. James does not use Job to make suffering smaller. He uses Job to say this: there have been real human beings who walked through nights that were long, confusing, and unbearably heavy, and their story did not end in abandonment. James says that we know of the perseverance of Job, and then he directs the eyes of the reader to the thing that matters most. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. This is one of the most precious lines in part 7. Because after all the trial, the waiting, and the pain, James does not want people to remember only the burden. He wants them to remember the character of God. Not a cold God, not a distant God, not a God who sits back only to see how much you can endure, but a God full of compassion, full of mercy. Maybe someone tonight needs to hear exactly that, because they feel ashamed. They have fallen. They have been weak. They have been addicted. They have said things they should not have said. They have thought thoughts that make them afraid to come near God. They feel too tired, too broken, too lost. James does not end his letter with a God of law only. He reminds us of a God full of mercy. As Psalm 103 sings, "The Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in mercy." So if tonight the listener cannot hold on to any other sentence, let it be this: God is full of compassion. God is full of mercy. Lord, let my soul rest in your mercy. Do not let me see you through the eyes of fear, but through the light of grace. Then James does something very beautiful near the end of his letter. He leads people into prayer. He does not only talk about trial, he shows the reader what to do in the middle of it. Is anyone among you suffering? Let him pray. Is anyone cheerful? Let him sing praise. That one sentence alone is already enough for tonight. If you are suffering, pray. If you are hurting, pray. If you cannot sleep, pray. If you do not know what else to do, pray. James does not tell the hurting to save themselves. He does not tell them to sit still in despair. He brings them back to God. This is what makes the letter of James so close to the kind of comments you loaded from real data. Please pray for me. Pray for my family. I'm sick. I feel lost. I can't sleep. I'm grieving. I'm addicted. I'm anxious. I need help. James heard those cries long before they became comments under a video. He heard them in the early church. And his answer is not complicated. Pray. Not as a ritual, but as a refusal to let suffering rule completely. As a way of pulling the soul out of isolation. As an honest confession that we need God more than we need to pretend to be strong. Lord, when I do not know what to say, receive even my sigh as a prayer. When I am weary, do not let me run from you, but run back to you. Then James goes even deeper. Is anyone sick? The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. If you are suffering, pray. If you are sick, let others pray for you. If your heart is full of darkness, do not hide forever. Bring it before God. And if you are lost, know that you can still be brought back. If the listener tonight wants to keep one short sentence before stepping into part 8, then let it be this: Lord, draw me close to you again. Keep me in the mercy of your heart. Let my soul rest quietly in you. James does not end his letter with a long farewell. He does not end with decoration. He does not end with some vague emotion. He ends with the heart of a shepherd. After everything he has said about trial, endurance, wisdom, not merely hearing the word but living it, speech, mercy, prayer, healing, and patience in the waiting season, James closes with something very real. If anyone wanders from the truth and someone brings them back, that is a very precious thing before God. That tells us what kind of man James is. He does not only want people to be correct, he wants them to be saved. He does not only want them to hear a good letter, he wants them to be pulled back from the edge. He does not only want to correct outward behavior, he wants a wandering soul to be embraced again by grace. That is where James touches this night very deeply. Because maybe the person listening is not only tired, maybe they also feel lost. Lost from peace, lost from simple closeness with God, lost from their first joy, lost from purity, lost from the person they once thought they would become, lost in fear, debt, sickness, temptation, loneliness, and sleepless nights. James does not write as though the lost are beyond hope. He writes like a man who believes the lost can still be brought back. That fits so well with the one whom James met. Because Jesus was not only the one James once lived in the same house with, not only the risen one who changed his life, he is also the one who seeks the lost, calls the weary, lifts the weak, and does not put out the smouldering wick. So tonight, if you are listening with the feeling that you have gone too far, become too weak, fallen too many times, lost direction for too long, then part 8 does not come to shut the door. It comes to say this: you can still be brought back. Not by your own strength, not by fixing your whole life tonight, but by letting God bring you back to himself. James walked that road. He was once near Jesus while his heart was not yet fully surrendered. Then he met the risen one. Then he was changed. Then he stood up. Then he became a support for those under trial. And finally, he closed his letter not with pride, but with an invitation to return. So if the whole journey of James had to be gathered into just a few short lines, perhaps it would be this: a real faith does not only carry a name, a real faith is lived out. A real faith stands in the fire. A real faith asks God for wisdom. A real faith prays in pain. A real faith knows how to wait. A real faith is full of mercy. And a real faith does not leave the wandering behind. That is why James can be closed in the very spirit your original script was already moving toward. A faith that acts, a love that moves forward, and a hope that endures. And now, as James has finished speaking, tonight you do not need to keep every sentence. You do not need to remember every point. You do not need to stay awake trying to write everything down. You only need to let the truest things remain in your heart, very gently. God does not abandon you in trial. God is not the author of darkness. Every good thing comes from the Father, If you lack wisdom, ask God. If you are hurting, pray. If you are weak, let others pray for you. If you have wandered, you can still be brought back. And if tonight your heart is too tired to hold many things, then hold only this. God is still here. He is here in this room, here in this breath, here in the weariness you cannot fully speak out, here in the fear that still has no name, here in the burden of money, sickness, family, the future, and the things you cannot control. Here when your eyes still refuse to close, here when you feel weaker than the faith you wish you had. And because He is here, tonight you can begin to lie down, not in abandonment, but in being kept. Psalm 4 says so gently, "I will lie down and sleep in peace, for you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety." You alone. Not money that keeps your soul, not calculation that keeps your soul, not staying up later that makes you safer, not clinging tightly to every worry that will make tomorrow better. You alone. He is the one who keeps watch while you sleep. He is the one who does not grow drowsy when you are exhausted. He is the one who has not forgotten this room. He is the one who has not forgotten this house. He is the one who has not forgotten the loved one you carry in your heart. He is the one who has not forgotten your name. Psalm 121 reminds us, "He who watches over you will neither slumber nor sleep." So tonight, you do not need to stay awake trying to keep the whole world from collapsing. You do not need to guard tomorrow with your anxiety. You do not need to be the gatekeeper of your whole life. God is already the keeper. Lord, watch over this room. Watch over this house. Watch over the children who are sleeping. Watch over the one who is sick. Watch over the one who is far away. Watch over my mind from noises that do not come from you. Watch over this night in your peace. And if your body is tired, let Psalm 23 settle over you like a soft blanket. The Lord is my shepherd. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Cannot heal, I give to you. What I cannot keep, I give to you. What I cannot understand, I give to you. What I fear most, I give to you. The people I love, I give to you. This night, I give to you. This sleep, I give to you. Because in the end, what lets a person sleep is not that they have solved everything. It is that they have been placed into the right hands. And those are the hands of God. The hands that held James through his journey. The hands that held the scattered believers. The hands that held the hurting, the poor, the trembling, the waiting. And those same hands are still holding you. So now, do not keep staying awake trying to protect yourself. Do not keep standing guard until morning through tension. Do not let your mind become the soldier guarding your whole life. God is watching over you. God sees, God is here. If you want to say one final word before sleep, let it be very short. Lord, keep me. Keep my house. Keep my loved ones. Keep my heart. Let me sleep in your peace. Or simply, Lord, I am here. I am tired. Please let me rest. And now, no more words are needed. Only the presence of God. Only the breathing becoming slower. Only the eyes becoming heavier. Only the room growing gentler. Only the night fading into His mercy. James has finished speaking. The prayer has been enough. The rest you do not need to do. Let God do the rest. He will watch over you while you sleep. He will stay near while your eyes close. He will not leave in this quiet part. He will not abandon you in the night. He will not fall asleep while you drift into sleep. So now, relax a little more. Let the shoulders soften. Let the forehead soften. Let the jaw soften. Let the chest grow lighter. Let the breath slow down, and very gently, let this sentence settle in your heart, like one final anchor before sleep. God is full of mercy. God does not sleep. God is holding me. In Him I can rest. In peace, lie down. In His covering, close your eyes. In the love of God, let the burden go, and if sleep comes slowly, that is all right. God is still here in every slow minute. Now, rest. Amen.